If you're parenting an autistic teenager, this is a stage where consent, it can't stay vague, and this is when guessing becomes risky. It's where that you'll just know stops being helpful and it's where clear rules really start to matter. So with autistic teens, they don't need hints or vibes. What they actually need is clarity. So this video, it's actually for the parents of autistic teens, but it'll also be useful if you're parenting any other neurodivergent teens more broadly, because a lot of the traits are similar. Therefore, the approach you take is very similar as well. Now, if you want to talk about sexual consent in a way that's calm, clear, and protective, please keep watching this video. And I guess what I want to say about sexual consent is that it isn't a moral lesson. It's actually a safety skill, a really important safety skill for kids to learn. Now, I'm autistic and I have ADHD myself. I'm a parent and I've also worked in sexual health for over 30 years. So I've supported a lot of families through this stage of parenting, and I've seen what happens when teens are expected to just figure it out. I also know myself what it was like growing up and becoming sexual and not understanding consent and having to learn about it through trial and error. So, when I talk about consent here, I'm not talking about ideals and values. I'm just talking about what actually helps to reduce harm, confusion, and regret. And to do that, we need to be very clear about what consent is and what it isn't. Consent, it's not romance, it's not mind reading, and it's not about guessing based on body language. Consent, it's clear communication, it's ongoing permission, and it can change at any time. It's where words matter more than the vibes or the feel of what's going on. And this matters especially for autistic teens because many of them process information literally and they rely on those clear rules rather than implied meaning. So, sexual consent means that both people or whoever's involved understand what's happening and they're choosing freely. They want what's happening and they're able or they know that they can say no or stop at any point. Consent needs to be clear, needs to be ongoing and respected immediately. And if something isn't clear, it isn't consent. So, with autistic teens, they often need this spelled out, not because they're unsafe, but because these rules are usually left unspoken. So teens might take flirting literally. They might miss subtle discomfort cues or assume that interest means permission, or they might freeze instead of saying no. So these are skill gaps that are caused when there's unclear teaching, not bad intentions. And when teens are expected to guess, some freeze and some keep going because they don't know how to stop safely. Clear consent rules will actually protect your teen and they also protect their partners as well. So it's okay to want sex and it's okay to not want sex, as well as to say yes to one thing and no to another. It's okay to change your mind halfway through something. And it's also okay to ask for something directly. None of these make someone rude or unsafe, and they make people safer when they can do these things. It's also not okay to pressure, beg, guilt, push, or just assume that consent has been given or to keep going after you've been told no. And it's not okay to use alcohol, drugs, gifts, or status to get sex as well. It's not okay to have sexual contact where there's a power imbalance. And that includes adults like teachers, coaches, health professionals, or family members. Also includes age gaps that create power differences. So more than about 2 years older or younger is a problem, even when both people are teenagers. Older teens, they usually have more social power and experience, and younger teens will often look up to them, and that imbalance matters. Power imbalance, it means there's no consent because it's an imbalance, so they can't consent. Now, I want to talk about why telling teens to, be respectful, why it isn't enough, and why our teens need words that they can actually use. So, helpful scripts include things like being direct and saying, "Can I kiss you? Is this okay? Do you want me to stop?" Refusal scripts, they matter just as much. So they're things like no, stop, or I'm not comfortable. Silence or hesitation, that means stop and check that you've got consent. And scripts, they reduce the anxiety, they remove that guesswork, and they make consent possible when our young people are under pressure. Now, direct consent language, it can feel awkward or a little bit off putting at first, but directness is protective. And look, I read a lot of young adult fiction, YA fiction, and I'm starting to see consent woven more and more into the sex scene, which I'm really pleased to see because it's so nice to see examples of it in the literature that we read, even though most of those books, what they're doing is totally unrealistic and you know, every person with a penis has a huge penis in romance books, which isn't reflective of real life, but they are a form of literature that young people learn from. So it's really nice to start seeing consent getting woven into those. Now, back to being direct and protective. So when people say clearly what they want and what they don't want, there's a lot less guessing, there's less pressure and far less harm as well. So what matters the most, it isn't about sounding smooth. What matters is about staying safe at the end of the day. I'm going to look at peer pressure, and peer pressure, it's at its loudest at this age. And many teens, they feel that pressure because they think everyone else is doing things. So what matters to know and to say out loud and to let your young person know is that people exaggerate, people brag, and people make things up to sound more confident and to fit in. And look, this has always been true. It was true when I was a teenager, and it's true now as my kids have been teenagers as well. And for autistic teens, neurodivergent teens in particular, this really matters because many of us take words at face value, and everyone doing it can actually feel like it's factual and what's really happening. So, helpful messages to repeat are just because someone says something doesn't mean it's true, or you don't need to do what others are doing to, be okay. And things like, you get to decide what's right for you at your pace. So consent isn't just about another person, it's also about not being pushed by social pressure. Consent also applies to things like photos, videos, and messages. The rules are pretty simple. Never pressure, never share without permission, and permission can be withdrawn. Digital consent is still consent, so it's something we need to consider and talk about. Let's look at what you can do when someone doesn't respect your consent. You might say no, you might say stop, you might want to try get some distance and tell a trusted adult. And this applies even if they know the person, like the person, or have said yes before, because consent, it can always change. So this isn't about fear, it's about having an exit plan before it's needed. And it's important that we do talk about that with our kids about what to do in those situations. Now, a lot of parents worry that talking about consent will actually encourage sex or that their teen isn't ready for this information. So, what decades and decades of sexual health work shows us is that preparation actually reduces the risk. And when parents are silent, it actually increases the vulnerability of our kids. And neurodivergent teens, they cope better when information's predictable, clear, and also repeated as well. And look, clear consent teaching, it doesn't push teens forward, it keeps them safer. Okay, so let's look at some phrases that you can repeat to help your child to remember this stuff. So we've got consent is ongoing. Words matter more than guessing. You never owe anyone access to your body, and you can always talk to me. So remember, you don't need one perfect conversation, you just need to stay open. Now, this is the stage where legal issues can arise. Trauma can happen, but confidence can also be built. Clear sexual consent education actually protects everyone involved. And look, remember, you don't have to do this alone. Sex Ed Rescue exists to support parents with calm, neuroaffirming resources. So, what's important to remember? You don't need to say everything at once. Start with one clear rule and repeat it calmly. And remember that being an askable parent, that's actually the goal. It's not about being perfect. Now, this video is part of a 4-part consent series with each stage building on the last. So if you want to start earlier, the first video covers consent with babies, toddlers, and under 5s. And each video focuses on one stage so you don't have to, learn everything at once. And please remember, you're not late, you're doing something protective, and that's what matters.